I'm the only person alive in the world who has who took the leadership of the Conservative Party just after it was thrown out of office, which was in 1997. And nobody saw me coming at all at that time. So the way you go about becoming the future leader is not actually to, have a group that's called something going around touting you as the future leader. I was 66-1 against at the bookies a few months before I became leader of the Conservative Party. And it's also worth saying that the more people go on about things like that, the fewer of them would be in Parliament anyway to stand for the leadership.
William Hague, you are a big fan of Rishi Sunak. You had that conversation with him, which was really interesting last week. Do you think that he suffers a little bit from trying to be very kind of, enthusiastic and kind of go-getting and dynamic, and actually sometimes he gets the tone wrong?
No, well, he is. Is he go-getting? Is he enthusiastic? Is he dynamic? Yes, guilty of all those things. I think he is all those things. But I don't know if you mean the tone wrong in that interview.
In that clip, yes.
Well, he's obviously not going to. I actually asked him in that podcast I did with him last week. Of course, I teased him about you can announce the election date if you want on the cast. But of course, I knew he wasn't going to do that. And everybody knows he's not going to do so on a radio program, even as distinguished as Radio T's. He is not going to do that. And everybody also knows that the election is in the next, it has to be by the end of January. So that is the next 9 months. It has to be held. So, it's a bit futile, isn't it, to batter the Prime Minister on a radio program about why he's not announcing the election date when everybody knows why he isn't.
I suppose so. I mean, and you don't want to kind of micro examine every single thing that the Prime Minister does, but I suppose it's just the laughter perhaps was not best advised.
Well, so he's often accused of being tetchy, so then when he laughs, he's laughing too much. He's just got up in the morning and he's trying to be natural, and he is natural, and
yes.
we're all feeling.
Okay, what about
I think he's allowed to laugh like we're laughing about it now.
Well, we're not the Prime Minister. Right, Priti Patel, the next Prime Minister, what do you think if Rishi Sunak were to depart after the election, William?
Well, this is all a completely futile debate. Now, I do know a lot about this because I'm the only person alive in the world who has who took the leadership of the Conservative Party just after it was thrown out of office, which was in 1997. And nobody saw me coming at all at that time. So the way you go about becoming the future leader is not actually to, have a group that's called something going around touting you as the future leader. I was 66-1 against at the bookies a few months before I became leader of the Conservative Party. And it's also worth saying that the more people go on about things like that, the fewer of them would be in Parliament anyway to stand for the leadership. Because if you well, it's natural people move on to what they think is the next thing, the next chess move after the next one in politics. The next general election hasn't been held, as we've just been discussing. We don't know the result, and we certainly don't know who will be in Parliament on the Conservative side. So they should all concentrate on making the election a competitive election and then talk about a leadership election, if that arises after that, not now.
Well, but having said that, I'm interested in what you know about support levels for Priti Patel anyway, because, she was very much at the forefront for a long time as Home Secretary, then very much, took a back seat and now she's back. Is she still very popular amongst just the kind of rank and file Conservative MPs and members of the Conservative Party?
Well, I don't know. She's an old friend of mine because can you believe she was my press officer a long time ago? I'm going back a long way now. I'm going back more than a quarter of a century. So I've always been on good terms with her personally. But there is no reliable guide on your question of what anybody's support is for a circumstance that hasn't arisen yet. That is my main point.
Okay.
Because what politics will look like, whatever happens in the election, what politics will look like after the election will be very, very different from how it looks today. And there's no point going around, getting this MP to agree to do that and that MP to do this, when those MPs might not even be there after the election.
Okay. Kezia, would you have a view on Priti Patel, or do you have a view on like Brenda and Bristol, not another one, basically, not another candidate this time after the election, not before?
I think this is an extraordinary story when you get into the detail of it. So the idea being that there's a particular MP, Mark Littlewood, organising for what will happen in the aftermath of a devastating loss for the Conservative Party. And he says he's got a strategy to ensure that the leadership of the Conservative parties can be held by this kind of new movement of the popcons. But his whole strategy, which he's revealed in the paper, is built on securing the votes of 70 MPs and that being enough to win the leadership. Well, that tells us that he thinks the Conservatives are going to have 140 MPs or around that mark after the election, which is an extraordinary admission this far out. Look, I think the type of person that you need to be as a leader of an opposition party is very different from the type of person that you might want to be Prime Minister. Certainly in the circumstances that this Conservative leader is going to find themselves in, William was probably exactly the right type of person at exactly the right time, somebody with a lot of energy, time on their side, some ideas about how to rebuild. I think the party's going to have to take a long, hard look at itself before it works out who the person is it needs to lead it. It needs to work out what the party itself has learned from an election defeat and go from there.
Yeah, it's interesting. And Mark Littlewood is not even an MP. He is the director of the Popular Conservatism Group. It's quite interesting, actually, as you say this piece. He's told friends that the popcorn candidate of choice will need the backing of 70 MPs and 70,000 party members. So it's a 70,000 strategy, which is very, very catchy.
It might mean also, William, there's a poll over the weekend that suggests they wouldn't get 100 seats, the Tories. I mean, this is what, imagine being Rishi Sunak, William, and saying, looking at this, that the talk isn't about how bad the election result's going to be. The talk is the result is going to be absolutely awful. What are we going to do about it? It's impossible to win from that position, isn't it, William? That's the point. That the idea of winning or even losing well seems to have gone. People are already talking about the post-tragedy incident.
Well, it is difficult, yeah, and this is the sort of resilience test that we're all given in politics these days, or some of us are given. I certainly was given it before the 2001 election, of sort of, can you keep going and can you keep smiling, even though everybody says you're finished? And so, that is difficult, but there he is, Rishi Sunak, as we've been discussing, is there, putting his case and being positive, and even managing a laugh earlier this morning. That's what he has to keep on doing right up to whenever the election is. And it would be really helpful to him if other people, whether they're popular Conservatives or unpopular Conservatives, would support him in that task rather than talking about what happened afterwards.